Welcome, welcome. We'll give you a few minutes to roll in here. I don't know about you guys, Murph, but we are having I'm outside of Seattle, everybody, and we are having a killer beautiful day today. So
Other side of the
I can't-
country, here in New Jersey, it is also a killer day. Like a
beautiful.
spring,
Well,
like a
I'm hoping
solid.
the same is up in Boston for all of you. Probably, right?
I heard that there was some snow, and I might be wrong, but I heard there was some snow in like that area, Connecticut, maybe up in Massachusetts. So over the weekend,
Yeah. Are you guys getting snow? You can put it in the chat. Let us know. Is
just
it a
heard this
winter
earlier.
is it a winter wonderland or is that just one of those weather urban myths? Nobody's putting it in the chat.
No one. Maybe I
Everybody's
got
being
bad
shy
info.
today.
I think I got bad info.
Yeah. 60 and beautiful. Nice.
Ooh,
That's about what we got out here outside of Seattle. So, all right, everybody. Well, welcome, welcome. Super excited to be here with all of you at BC High. We know your counselor, Brian Ford. We love him dearly. He's a wonderful, wonderful man, wonderful counselor. So, um, if you are new to us, we are College Aid Pro, and this is what we do. This literally, I am so excited to have Kevin Murphy with me here tonight. We call him Murph. Um, and this is what gets us out of bed, right? This whole process, if you're just starting to get into it, you're just starting to see, and if you've been in it for a little bit, it's really confusing and convoluted and counterintuitive sometimes. So the more you know about financial aid, and then even more importantly, where you fit as a family, it puts you so far ahead of the game across the board. It's going to be less stressful, hopefully less expensive. You can more effectively set expectations with your child and sit down and do this. And by the way, I have twins who have graduated college quite a few years ago. They're like 10 years out. It's crazy. Almost 10 years out. And it is possible to get through this process without massive amounts of stress. A lot of families don't manage to do that, and that's part of the reason why we're here. We know the journey that you're on, and we really enjoy kind of supporting you along the way on this journey. So um again, I'm Peg Keough. I'm the director of education here at College Aid Pro, and my background is in the financial industry. And then when my kids, I have a boy and a girl, when they hit high school, I had been saving for college and helping hundreds of families do that. And then I started looking into how does this work? Like they're in high school now. It's like game time. And I was just so surprised at how much more complicated it was than when I was, a kid, as if Matt were on, he'd say hundreds and hundreds of years ago when I was a kid, right?
I
So
don't. You know, I'm not mean.
you won't. You're just way
No,
too sweet to joke
I
like that.
couldn't
I
bring
know.
myself to do.
But that's when I pivoted and started my own business and just focused on helping families, just like all of you. And then I ended up joining CAP about 3.5 years ago. It was just a good time for me to not be solo anymore and to get a team. And it was a great change. So again, super excited to have Kevin Murphy with me here tonight. He is one of our experts. We have a team of experts and he is one of our shining lights. So why don't you just take a minute, introduce yourself, and then we will get started.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so thank you for mentioning I'm one of the experts here at College Aid Pro, and I got started on the financial aid, or excuse me, on the financial services side, and I quickly fell in love with the financial aid side and the college planning aspect of it. So since 2018, that's all I've done. Fortunately, I've been able to work with over 1,000 families and help them navigate this process inside and out, and we're wrapping up appeals right now. But yeah, that's enough about me. That's a little bit of background, but let's kick off the presentation.
Yeah, yeah. A couple housekeeping things before I share my screen. We love questions, so don't be shy. Please put them in the Q&A. Like we might ask you to put something in the chat during the presentation, but your questions put in the Q&A and you can be anonymous. It's just a little box you can check, and some people that's helpful to be able to be anonymous if you so choose. And this is being recorded, so you will get the recording tomorrow. That's like the number one question we get. So questions in the Q&A. We'll remind you if people enter late and they're putting them in the chat, and then you will get the recording. So let me share my screen and let's get this show on the road. So as I shared, we are with College Aid Pro. This bottom phrase here, this is really what we're doing tonight. We're empowering you to shop smarter for college because you literally are going shopping for college. You're consumers and you're going shopping. And as I said earlier, the more you know about this, the better you'll be able to see where you fit. And it's going to be different. It's good. Like with my two kids, it was different with my two kids. Obviously our finances weren't different, but they were different kids. They had different interests and different backgrounds. So it's not even just family specific, and it matters at the school. Schools are getting really, really expensive, which I'm sure all of you know. And so that affects things as well. All right, so there we are. So we strongly encourage you, and Murph's going to put this link in the chat. This is a unique link for BC High. We have software and there's a free version of it. You can put up to 3 colleges in there. I'm going to go in later just to do some teaching in there, but we strongly encourage you to set up your free account. You just click Get Started for free. You create a username and password. And there's about 3 or 4 minutes of onboarding questions. If you don't know all the answers, don't stress about it because you can always change them once you're in there. You just click on your profile and you're probably going to want to change them as things change. Your child takes the ACT again or GPA or you get a raise or whatever it is. Not hard to get onboarded. And then we're about to talk about how financial aid works. You're going to be able to see all these things we're talking about tonight for your family. And then we're going to show you net costs at colleges for your child and your family. So it's really powerful. And it's, as I said, free version. You can put up to 3 colleges. So strongly suggest that you do that. It's not very time consuming, and then you can play around in there. Okay. So let me kick it off. Let's just talk about financial aid high level. The biggest takeaway is, and this is one of these counterintuitive things you see all over the media, colleges now are over $100,000 a year. Not all of them, thank God, but there is a chunk of them now that they are over $100,000 a year for this fall, for class of 2025. But it kind of doesn't matter because all these colleges are discounting. We like to call it the sticker price, but it's the cost of attendance, official name, which is tuition and fees, room and board, books, travel, personal expenses. As we all know, this has been going up for decades, faster than inflation most of the time. I mean, it's crazy how it's inflated. And it just is what it is. We can't control the increase in cost of attendance, but you can understand how these colleges are discounting so that you can capture discounts. I'm pretty sure everybody on this webinar would rather not pay $100,000 or $80,000 or $75,000 full price when your child can find a great academic, personal, financial fit school and get a discount, right? So how do they do this? There's 3 different buckets, if you will, that they use to create these discounts. So there's need-based grants. So as the name kind of hints, you have to have financial need. And Murph's going to talk about that in a few minutes. These can come from the federal government, states, as well as institutional grants. And that is the colleges, right? That is by far the biggest bucket. That from that bucket, that's the best source is the colleges. And you have to understand what we call their business plan. How do they give out need-based aid? Do they give out need-based aid? And in what percentages? The middle bucket is the flip side. That's the merit-based scholarship. So it has nothing to do with your finances. It's completely about your child. Grades, test scores, talents, sports, music, leadership, whatever it happens to be. Not all colleges give this out. Some give it out to the tune of $35,000, $40,000 a year. Really, really nice discounts. And then, below that as well. Then the last bucket is what we call self-help. So that's loans and work study. Work study is a need-based form of aid. The government pays half the wage. And loans, we know what loans are, right? And loans aren't necessarily the enemy. It's just reasonable loans. And that's a conversation for another webinar. But those are the 3 ways that this cost of attendance can be discounted. So I want to take a minute and show you an actual family from a couple years ago. So as I said, I'm outside of Seattle. So this is the University of Washington and Gonzaga out in Spokane. So that's Eastern Washington private school. So if you look at those sticker prices, and this is a couple years ago, so Gonzaga is actually more than that now, but you look at it and say 35,000 versus 77,000. Well, it's easy to do the math in your head for Gonzaga and say, that's just way too much. You're not even going to look at that school. But I want to show you what happened with this student at the end of the day. This family had a student aid index, and Murph's going to talk about that in a minute, of $30,000. And look at the package that the student got. They actually are paying full price. They got some loans from University of Washington, but I'm not taking loans out because they got to be repaid full price. But look at Gonzaga. It went down to $40,000 because of a combination of need-based and merit aid. And that does happen. So that's a really different conversation for parents to sit down maybe behind the scenes and say, you know what? Another $5,500 because they have XYZ program or it's a smaller school that's a better fit for our child being successful. That's completely different. And this happens all the time. This is the discounting that I'm talking about. It's not rare. And so you have to understand how this works. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Murph, to get in the weeds a little bit on the need-based aid.
Absolutely. And that example too, it's just public school, so think UMass. And then it's also private school, so like St. A's, Bentley, Sacred Heart, all like same point, same example. Now, in terms of need-based financial aid, how do you know if you're actually eligible for any need? And nowadays, with colleges costing $100,000 a year, a lot more people are eligible than you would actually think based on income and assets. Now, the very, very, very important formula that everyone should know is cost of attendance, which is the full sticker price out of college. And then you subtract the student aid index from that, which your student aid index is a number that's based on your income and assets that, as we say here, colleges and the government think you can pay annually. And the difference between those two numbers equals your demonstrated need. So that's how much financial aid your family's potentially eligible to receive. So we'll just throw some numbers in here to make a simple example. If the cost is 80 and you're expected to pay 50, you have $30,000 of demonstrated need that you're eligible to receive. Now it's up to the college to meet that need. Anything you'd want to add here?
I would just say that's what the college is going to look at. A lot of colleges don't meet 100% of need. So it's not that whatever that student aid index is, that's what you're going to pay for college. And by the way, out of all the families I've ever worked with, one mom in all those years looked at the number and said, yeah, that makes sense, Peg. Most people fall off their chair, swear, laugh. They just can't believe how high the number is. And when you set up your free account in our software, it's going to be right up there front and center. I'm going to show you in a few minutes both of your student aid indexes, but it's really, that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. You have to know good estimates of those numbers so that you can move through this process and
Yeah,
understand where you're going to get discounts. So, yeah.
absolutely. Good points. Okay, now what should you know about your student aid index and what is it actually made of? So everything but your retirement accounts are considered assets. So your 401k, your IRA, a Roth IRA, 403b, pension plans, all of that's excluded. But you are going to be reporting things like non-retirement cash, checking, savings, investments. All of that does get reported. And everything gets reported on the day of filing. So if you file on October 15th, it's the value of all of your assets on that day that you file the forms. And unfortunately, nowhere on the form reflects debt, right? There's no question about how much do you have in installment debt or consumer debt or any personally secured debt. But there's usually a way to kind of factor that in. And it's really important to keep that in mind. Now, in terms of parent assets versus student assets, this is really important to take note of. Any asset that's in your name is factored at 5.64%. So that's a very big difference than how they count student assets. Student assets are factored at 20%. So that's almost 4 times the impact of an account in your name, excuse me, your student's name versus your name. Now, grandparent 529s, those are not included. Sibling 529s, those are not included. So all of that money that's in those types of 529s is excluded from the forms. Now, UGMA and UTMA accounts are included as custodial accounts, and those are student assets. And any parent-owned 529, so if you're the owner and your student's the beneficiary, that is included. And jointly owned accounts are included as well. And in terms of real estate, your primary home is excluded from the federal formula. So your primary home is excluded from the FAFSA, and it's really tricky because it says on there, including real estate, and everyone gets tricked up. The only real estate that gets included on the FAFSA, investment properties, rental real estates, beach houses, things like that, the equity in those properties is included as an investment on the FAFSA. Things are a little bit different on the CSS profile, but important to keep in mind what's going on for the FAFSA right now. Anything you want to
Yeah,
add to
and
that?
we'll chat about the two forms
Mm.
in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, but yeah. Yeah, 529s is always the big question, and that's a common mistake, and it's logical because people say, "Well, I've saved that money for my child, so that's my child's money." It isn't. It's actually not a gift to your child. You still own that in a 529, but as Murph said, UGMAs and UTMAs are the flip side. That used to be the only game in town to save for a minor, and you are actually gifting it to that minor. So it's theirs. Like even though you're the custodian for it, it's their money. There is a strategy to move that into somebody else's name. That's something we'd have to talk to you about one-on-one because there's tax ramifications. You need to check if it's even going to help you before, most people have a lot on their plate already. Why do something that's not going to benefit you? But I'm just planting that seed, especially if we've got people that have, sophomores in high school right now. There's different things that can be done. Everybody can do it, but there's, doing things early and understanding this early is hugely important. Yeah. So, okay, that's assets.
Do you want to answer that question live about jointly owned accounts? I just
Sure. Let me just take a peek at it.
no, just our
Yeah,
jointly owned accounts.
jointly. Yeah. So if you, and that's super common, right? That you have an account with your child. If
Mhm.
you're both on the registration, then you can put it as a parent asset. Some
Yep.
people split it. But we tell people, hey, you can put it as your asset because you're on it. If your child's the only one on it, then that's why you hear in the media or you might read, don't have assets in your child's name because as Murph said, 20% for the FAFSA federal methodology and the CSS profile is actually
25.
25%.
Yeah.
They just expect kids to divide their assets by 4 and they'll be gone. They're paying for college, right? So that's where if you're eligible for need-based aid, which you'll see if you are as we work through this tonight and you set up your account, that's a big deal. You don't want assets in your child's name if you're going to have a chance to be eligible for need-based aid. You want to finish up the
Yeah,
income
sorry.
and then
Yes.
I'll pick. No, you're
Um,
good. Yeah,
so
put your questions in the Q&A if you would.
yeah, definitely please put your questions in the Q&A. But so in terms of income, the prior tax year is what the colleges use. And that might sound a little bit confusing. So an easier way to think of it is, well, your student's high school graduation year -2. And for those of you on tonight's call who have juniors, your students are going to graduate in 26. So that means that they're going to use the 2024 tax returns. If you have sophomores, they'll look at the 2025 tax returns. If you have freshmen, they'll look at the 2026 tax returns. And, as you can see, they're looking back. There's also a lot of planning opportunities from a tax perspective, maybe to qualify for more money or maybe not to make a mistake and qualify for less money. See a lot of things like rollovers and whatnot that oftentimes disqualify families for aid. So that's important to keep in mind, and that's absolutely something we could do at this point in the process. Now, in terms of income, they're primarily looking at your adjusted gross income. So if you were to look at a 1040, that would be line 11. And that's pretty much everything put together. And then for students, I always get the question, I don't know about you, Peg, but everyone's like, can my kids work? Can they earn money or will it impact aid? And they can. The federal methodology allows for students to earn $11,510 in a given year without it counting against them for the sake of financial aid. The CSS profile and the institutional methodology is slightly different, but from a federal perspective, that's the limit.
All right. So I'm going to kick in here. So say you're a good multitasker, which data says, well, none of us are good multitaskers, but say you did set up your MyCap account while we've been chatting. If you're looking up there and you're seeing some pretty big numbers, or you do that, tonight or tomorrow, and you see a student aid index that's say $130,000. Murph and I have seen this hundreds and hundreds of times, like very high. They used to call it an expected family contribution. Some schools, the CSS profile schools, are still using that terminology. If you have a high number there and you verify that that's a good estimate, that means you're not eligible for need-based aid. Thank God no schools actually costs $130,000, $150,000 yet, right? So you still might not want to or be able to pay 90, 95,000 or whatever that sticker price is. But there is another option. And if you remember on the slide that I was talking through, that middle bucket was merit-based scholarships. So again, this is based on your child. This is given out by the Office of Admissions, not the Office of Financial Aid that gives out need-based aid. So two different departments at the university. And honestly, this is when this discounting starts. And these admissions offices, you might not have submitted the FAFSA or the CSS profile, and they're already giving out merit aid because they want your child. They're already starting this discounting. They're trying to entice your child, and honestly, you as a parent, as the person who's going to be paying for the lion's share of it. Hey, we want your kid. We're going to discount our 80,000 by $20,000 a year with this dean scholarship, whatever it happens to be. Merit is awesome because it's almost always offered for 4 years. If you don't see it in print, you got to reach out to the school and confirm it, but that's very common. The student just needs to maintain a certain GPA, and it's not a 4.0. They just want to make sure kids are doing well in school. They're doing well enough. They're not on academic probation and getting a merit scholarship. If you're going to generalize, private colleges, you're going to see merit scholarships more, but there's plenty of state schools that give out merit. It's just not as common. And if you look at a class, how many kids are getting it and how many aren't. There are schools in this country that basically will give a scholarship to every kid they admit, right? And then there's all the way to schools that don't give out merit aid. So we want to talk a little bit more about this, because if this is the name of the game for discounts for your family, you're going to want to understand this. Because I remember when I first started my business and you would see stuff on social media, and I would have parents come to me and say, my kid got into like Dartmouth and Harvard and um, MIT and da 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 da, those kind of schools, Williams, and he got no money. He's got perfect this and perfect that. And he started a business. And I said, yeah, because you're not eligible for need-based aid. And those schools do not give merit aid. That's not part of their business plan. The Ivies, the MITs, the Stanfords of the world, there's no kid walking around those campuses with a merit scholarship. There's going to be a lot of kids that get need-based aid because they meet 100% of need. They figure out their own personal need of what your need is. But once they figure that out, and some of them, it's not even, there's no loans even in there. They'll give you the grant money from their bucket instead of giving you a federal loan. But they do not give merit scholarships. That doesn't mean they should go off your list if you have high SAIs. You just want to know that going in so that you balance your list for affordability. If it doesn't matter to you, you've got your eyes wide open, you're ready to write that full check or go find money elsewhere, you're in the know. And if you're in the know, then we've done our job. And what we don't like is the deer in the headlights, and people are just like, oh my gosh, I'm shocked. Where's the money? And I'm like, yeah, if we had met you, 9 months ago, we could have told you there's not going to be any money coming from there. Um, some people will say, we're going to spend some time on financial aid forms in a few minutes. They'll say, well, if I'm not eligible, why am I even doing these forms? It's a pain. I'm disclosing things. One of the reasons is that some schools, and like NYU, super popular school on the East Coast, they are one of the schools that says, hey, if you don't have these forms on file, we're not going to look at you for merit aid. Not that they're a massive merit aid giver outer, because they are absolutely not. They do have merit aid though. So and there's no uniform list that you can just pull up online to see all the schools that require that. But you want to be really careful. That's another conversation of all the different reasons that at CAP, we always tell people most families should be submitting both. Every family should pretty much be submitting the FAFSA and the CSS most likely as well. But this is one of the biggest reasons, because if you don't, then you might be leaving some money on the table in the form of merit aid, which would be, which would be sad, right? Like I said earlier, these awards can very, very 5 figures a year and usually guaranteed for 4 years. So it's a very, very nice discount. Another key thing about merit aid, and this is us looking ahead, when I said at the beginning, we know the journey you're on. You're going to get to a stage, and Murph mentioned it earlier, that he's with all of his families that he's working with one-on-one. He's doing appeals now with seniors, right? Going back to the college and saying, hey, but our situation changed, or hey, but this school gave XYZ and you guys gave this. Thank you so much, but can you match? And that's what this last bullet is about. When you are building your child's college list, it's important to think about, hey, in 7 months or less, we could be appealing. So if you're really psyched about Northeastern, you should be applying to BU. Even if you went to BU's campus and you're like, this is a city campus, I don't like it, I don't want it. If you're working one-on-one with a lot of our experts, they're going to say, just apply. Because if you get merit awards from both of those schools, you can play them off each other. And this is part of what happens all the time. This time of year, when the early decision kids get in all the way through April, this is what we're doing. Murph is amazing at it. He's gone back to BU one this year twice. Like, thank you for that. But now we're going to come back and talk to you again. And that's what it is. It's chatting. And I'll touch on this at the end. But the point here is merit aid is a part of this. You might even be able to generate, even if your child gets merit aid, if your child doesn't get merit aid, you can still appeal. You can still appeal. One of our experts, Mike Hinderman, is the head of scholarships at Oklahoma. And he said this year that the kids sent in this graph about their trajectory of how they had improved their whole high school career. And the scholarship office was just blown away at the uniqueness and originality of it. Like, we gave this kid merit aid. We were just so proud of him for doing it. So this is the game that you're in right now. These colleges are nonprofits, but they are big businesses. They have directors of enrollment management, and all they have algorithms and appeals, and all this kind of stuff is all part of it. That's where I said at the beginning, you got to understand this arena that you're playing in, because it's fun, but there's just a lot you don't know if you don't know. And so that's why we're here. So I'm going to share my screen and just quickly show you a sample family. And so we can what we've kind of talked about already, you can kind of see in practice of how it plays out with a family. So this is the dashboard of our software. So this is what it looks like. And you're going to see up here, these are the two estimates of your student aid indexes. And like I said at the beginning, it's so important to have these. You might be thinking, well, Peg, why isn't there one number here? These are the CSS profile schools that Murph's going to talk about in a couple minutes. There's a range, because they look, remember when Murph talked about real estate and he said your primary home, the home you live in, if you're not renting and you own your home, minus maybe what you owe the bank, that's your equity. The CSS profile schools, meaning the schools that require that financial aid form, a lot of them look at your home equity like it's just liquid and it's available, right? You can take a home equity line of credit, and some of them have the audacity to look at all of your equity, which is crazy because no bank would let you access it. That's why we have a range here, because we know what different schools do. For example, let's look here. Remember how I said at the beginning, these sticker prices are irrelevant? Well, look at what we're seeing here. These are pretty high sticker price schools that I would think some of your kids might be looking at. I've got UMass Amherst over here. It didn't show up, there are only 4 show up on one page. But look at these sticker prices and look at these discounts. And I want to point out here, like BC, right in your neck of the woods. They require the CSS profile. So they're up here, right? Columbia does too. And you might be thinking, wow, that is a huge difference in our net cost projections. That is because Columbia, in their business plan, they don't look at home equity. Even though they have access to that information philosophically, they don't think that they should be asking parents to tap their equity. That's a huge thing for you to understand if you're sitting on a lot of home equity. Whereas BC will look at the lion's share of it, and you see the difference in what they're still discounts, but you're expected to pay, this family is expected to pay a lot more to BC. I also want to point out UMass Amherst is a little shy of 40 all in for a Massachusetts student. That Columbia at over 105,000 is cheaper, right? So these are the things you want to understand. So that's what we do in here. We kind of show you, hey, these big sticker prices don't matter. Look at your net cost. And then you can go in and actually look at school. So why don't you, I know we said don't put stuff in the chat, but why don't you just, we'll just do one school. Go ahead and throw, your alma mater, if there's a school that your child's already super excited about, go ahead and throw some in the chat, and then Murph, you can throw one out to
I'll
me.
read some off. This is fun. Holy Cross, we've got a good one.
All right, let's look at Holy Cross. Yeah, that's a good one for where all of you guys are. Okay. Worcester. Here we go. Okay, so look at the discount that this family's getting. So Holy Cross, so if we click on that, let's look at Holy Cross. We're actually, this family's going to get a need-based grant, but also $20,000 merit scholarship, right? They'll combine in actuality. That's an $80,000 discount. And then you can scroll down for these schools that you plug in. You can see some admissions data, which is great. It's great to see where your child falls in the middle 50%, because if they're higher than it, we're likely to get merit if the school gives merit. If they're below it, not so much. The other thing that's great to look at is, we tell you how much need they meet, but then the percent of kids that get merit aid and the average merit aid, because you see average merit aid all over the place and you say, wow, Duke's average merit aid is 25,000, but they barely give it to any kid, so it doesn't really matter, right? And Holy Cross, 8.7%, it's not super high. But then you can scroll down and see all the different awards, and even we'll project it if it's likely, but just helps you start to hone in on this, and it's a great planning tool for you to just use all around affordability. You can also do searches putting in academic and personal filters. Like you want to have a school that's small, smaller, that has biology, that, is not too far from home, and boom, you can put that in and you can search here. I'll just show you real quickly. You can search by, if we look here, we won't mess with any of those. Let's just say location. Say your child, wants to go away, but not like super far away. And then let's look at academics. Let's just say, like I said, let's just say, whatever they want to major in, say it's bio and they're thinking pre-med, that far away. But you can see there's a lot of different filters. You can get into rankings. I'm not a huge fan of that, but it's there. But what's super powerful is you do the search and then you can sort it by what matters to you. If need-based aid is a factor, search for the best schools for need-based aid. Some of these schools, very hard to get into, but as I said earlier, these type of schools are great at meeting need, but might not be in the cards for your child. But you got Connecticut College, Trinity, different schools that might be a good fit. Say you have a really high SAI, then find the schools that's going to give your child the best merit aid. And this is not just Susquehanna's good with merit aid. It's saying for your child with those scores, we're projecting $43,000 a year. So if you haven't considered Susquehanna, it might be something you go check out online, right? And say, oh yeah, that's a great school from an affordability standpoint. Let's see if academically and personally it fits. So I love this because you truly are building a list with affordability in mind. You don't have to just focus on the dollars and cents. All three of the fits matter, but that the tool is really, really helpful. So, okay. So let's get back in the slides here. And let's go to come on. Oop, now it's advancing mega times. Yep. Now it went way to this is me being, hold on, let me go get to the slide. This was me being impatient and then it went, crazy.
Clicking one too many times. It's all
Yeah, I
good.
clicked, and then it's like, okay, now I'm going to the end. So that's my bad. Okay. So now let's look at the financial aid form. So the first form that we've both mentioned a couple times, I'll talk about the FAFSA, and then I'm going to kick it over to Murph to talk about the CSS profile. So the FAFSA is the federal form, but most colleges in the country only require this. The other form is about 250 schools. We have thousands of schools in this country. So we recommend, all families fill this out. Knock on wood, it should go live October 1st. If you have a class of 2026 child, it'll go live this October 1. Congress passed a law. Biden signed it before he left office that it needs to go live that day. And you don't have to submit it day one, but that's when it goes live. As Murph said, it's a prior year. So class of 2026, juniors, it's all going to be about 2024. It's over, right? You've already filed your taxes. Well, maybe not. You might be extending, and actually April 15th is tomorrow. So maybe you haven't filed yet. But you get my point. By the time October rolls around, you're really close, right? The money's been made, everything's happened in that year already. So that's your base year. A key thing about the FAFSA, and I saw a question I was going to write, we're going to talk about this in a minute, and then I got sidetracked. But if you are divorced or separated, only the custodial parent submits the FAFSA. And the definition of the custodial parent is the parent that provides the most financial support on a year look back from when you're submitting that form. So say you're submitting the FAFSA on October 15th, like Murph said earlier, it's a year look back from then. So if you are divorced and you're like, well, we're 50-50, don't be 50-50. You can literally spend $5 more on your child, and then that's the parent that's going to submit it. So if it's a massive planning opportunity to be able to look at and say, okay, which parent's financials make the most sense? And if you're amicable and you can make it work to have a conversation around that, or even if you're not 50-50, you know that now, so you can start planning to potentially make it so the parent that you want to be the custodial parent falls under the definition, because you always want to be honest. You don't, it's a federal form, it's fraud, and being honest is just what we always advocate for here at CAP. But huge planning opportunity. If you are remarried, though, that's part of the mix. So even though it doesn't matter if you have a prenup, if that person has kids, they have no intention of helping your child with college, none of that matters in financial aid. They're part of that household. So when you're doing this planning, which by the way, we're happy to help with as well. We've done a lot of consulting around that since this new rule came into place. But that's a big planning opportunity with the FAFSA. The way that you're going to get into the FAFSA, and we'll do much more detailed webinars just about these forms, but you do need a federal student aid ID. Your child needs it because it's technically their FAFSA. And you see the link here. If you Google it, this is what will come up. And just make sure you're on a studentaid.gov site and you're not on a dummy site, because you've got to put in your date of birth, your social security number, and then you create security questions, and that gets sent off to the Social Security Administration. And they check that you are who you are. That takes a few days. Just do it this summer. Don't wait until it's crunch time, because then people want to submit forms and they can't because their ID hasn't been approved yet. Depending on your marital status, and how you file your taxes, sometimes both parents, if you're married, if you file separately, need it. If you're divorced, only that custodial parent gets it. But we'll go over that when it gets closer. But just know that is the only way to get into each part of the FAFSA, because the parents are what's called contributors. They need to log in and give their information into their child's FAFSA. And of course, your child has to you need, if you're with them, helping them, that's fine, but it's their FAFSA that you log in. So that's what's required there. So that's the FAFSA. Strongly encourage everybody to fill it out. I'm going to let Murph talk about the other form that's quite a bit different, called the CSS profile.
CSS profile, it is definitely quite a bit different. I think that's a good way to put it. CSS profile, same thing, opens October 1st, but the CSS profile is a private financial aid form from College Board. And fun fact, CSS stands for College Scholarship Service. As Peg, as you've mentioned, only a couple hundred schools use this additional financial aid form, and it doesn't replace the FAFSA. It is in addition to the FAFSA. One of the big one of the big things on the CSS profile is that home equity is considered a liquid asset. It's essentially considered the same as savings in your bank account. Obviously, schools use it differently, as we went through before while showing the software, but that's a really big difference. And they ask quite a bit of questions. Your purchase price on your home, also kind of come up with the value. Now, in terms of divorced or separated families, we had a great question. I think it was in the Q&A earlier. Do they only have to fill out the FAFSA? On the CSS profile, some schools, very few, I saw Elon in there before and a few others, but some schools don't require non-custodial profile information. However, many schools do. So when you're doing the CSS profile, if you're in a divorced or separated household, both households have to provide their information. And it's a pretty difficult waiver to get approved. We've all been through it, but there is a waiver. It's called the non-custodial profile waiver. It's really specific. To get it approved, there needs to be no contact, no financial support, abuse, things like that. Really strong reasons not to provide that other parent's information. Now, for anyone who owns a business, there's additional business questions on the CSS profile, and they go pretty in depth. They ask for information from the business tax return. They ask for valuations. So there's a big opportunity, one, to either make a mistake, or two, to plan, strategically value the business and make sure you're doing everything you can to qualify for more money. The form itself, and I think we do a great job simplifying it, and sometimes maybe we oversimplify it, but it is it's a lot of questions. It's a completely different animal than the FAFSA, and there's a lot more room for mistake and room to either volunteer information that you don't have to volunteer, or simply just put the wrong number in. Now, to get into the CSS profile, you would log in using your student's College Board credentials. So the same email address and password that they use to log in to register for the SAT or the PSAT, same exact account, and that's what you would log in to use. A little bit different if we're a non-custodial parents on the call tonight. You actually have to create your own College Board account. There's a whole process to that. It's a little bit confusing. But basically, you're creating a student College Board account to complete your own profile. I think that,
It is confused. Yeah,
yeah,
it is confusing because you have to put yourself in as the student because you have to create your own record to get in there. But yeah, the CSS profile is and the FAFSA used to be, I forget how many questions, and now it's down to like 18. And the
you see
CSS
like
profile is
104 or something, like 104 or 130 questions. It was a lot.
yeah. Yeah, but the CSS is just it's a bear. It's a lot. They pretty much turn over every stone, they really do. They want to know every little bit. And with the non-custodial waiver, it's just this year I've had a few just heartbreaking stories with families where it really isn't safe for the child to be communicating with that parent, and that's where you do want to be open about that.
Mhm.
You really do, because the colleges, they'll get it if you're being sincere and honest, and but yeah, the one thing about waivers is you just can't say, well, my ex just doesn't think he or she wants to do it. That doesn't work, right? They think parents should have skin in the game is the philosophy there. But it's nice that there is an option for a waiver,
Yeah,
because in certain circumstances it's necessary. So yeah, so both
absolutely.
of these come in, and then this student aid index, this expected family contribution, this family contribution, whatever they want to call it, that's what they use to figure out how they're going to give you their money. And the colleges that require this, they tend to have larger endowments, and they tend to be a little bit more generous with need-based aid. So it's something, if you're eligible for need-based aid, you definitely want to get in and get through it. And that's something we help families with. All right, this is you, Murph.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so early decision, early action, and regular decision. Does it make a difference? Does it actually change how much money you get? Does it change acceptance? Break it down very quick. So early decision, it is binding. So your student, you, guidance counselor, all sign a contract stating that if accepted, your student will go. However, if the numbers don't work or you don't get as much money as you anticipated, that is absolutely a way out. It can help with admissions huge. Northeastern's a great example where if you look at the early decision rate and compare it to a regular decision, the difference is, I think, something like 4 or 8 times more likely to get accepted early decision. Now, you need to think ahead. You need to know the net cost. And this can change the appeals process, and you will absolutely lose leverage because you don't have any other offers, and you really are kind of just December having to make this decision of, paying the deposit and moving forward. So it's an accelerated process. You don't have other competing offers as leverage, and there's no flexibility with the appeals. You're going to have a good reason to get more money. Now, in terms of early action is not binding. So it's just kind of like an accelerated timeline. You get everything in early. It can still help with admissions. It demonstrates interest. You get the offers back earlier. Maybe you have more offers, and it also is big relief of stress, I think, when you get that first college acceptance. There's also an increased chance of getting merit aid, and just, I think, peace of mind. And then the last option too is regular decision. Regular decision, usually like January or February, the latest deadlines for admissions and financial aid. And this may be the only alternative at many schools to early decision. It's usually ED or RD. It's very common. Not every single school has early action. Many do, but not every single school does. Anything you want to add to that?
Would just emphasize that the key thing, if you're going to go early decision or your child's going to do that, it's you have to have a good idea of how what your package is going to be, your financial aid package. And, as parents or guardians, you've got to be good with that, because if you go through that, you're signing a contract, your counselor is signing a contract saying you're coming, right?
Yep.
And it helps with admission, like Murph said. But we have this every year where parents are like, oh my gosh, that's what we got.
Yep.
And it's a little heartbreaking because that's something that they could have had a good feel for before they allowed their child to go ED. So I really think that's where parents and guardians need to do their homework. That you should know, in an ideal world, you should know for all these schools, you should have a good estimate of what you think your net cost is going to be, but it's vital with early decision. It just really is. So
And
yeah.
that goes to a question we got to ask. If it's not binding, if you don't receive as much financial aid as you would need, how do you know how much financial aid you need? You have to do the work ahead of time. You have to do the net price calculator, put all your information in, get a sense of what the cost would be. And then in that instance, if for some reason the school truly isn't meeting the need that they promise or what the NPC says, yeah, many colleges do understand that from that financial perspective, if those numbers don't work, then it's a conversation you can have with them and ask to be released. But never ideal, right? I mean, early decision means if your student gets accepted, they're going to go, and you want to do the work ahead of time to make sure it's a good fit and the numbers work.
Yeah. And to Murph's point, if you do your homework, you're in our software, you match it with the net price calculator. Often they don't match, and then people will write us, and more often than not, we're more accurate than their net price calculators. Those are on their website that they're required to have by the federal government. But you do your homework. If they're really, you did your homework and it was supposed to be X, and it's just coming through completely differently. But that's not what we usually see. Usually what we see is people just didn't know, their neighbor said this or their sister said this and they just went with it, right? And in this process, friends and family are lovely, but not when it comes to financial aid, unless you're going to just bare your soul. You're literally going to say, okay, this is exactly everything my kid has done. This is all of our assets, all of, nobody does it. Nobody lays out their finances in this country. We don't at a cocktail party talk about our AGI and, how much, well, most of the people I like to hang out with don't do that. It's just not
Yeah.
what we do, right? So, but people love to take advice when you're out mowing the lawn, right? And it's not a good source. Neither is a Facebook group with a bunch of your peers. That's also not a good source. People are very well intentioned, but many of them, they don't really know. They're just, it's like this crowdsourcing helping, and it's, you wouldn't ask that for your intricate tax advice either. So, but
Yeah.
anyways, I'm getting off on a tangent. So let's wrap up. We both have mentioned this a couple times. Not going to go spend 10 minutes on this slide at all, just planting the seed. I talked about it when it came to merit aid and thinking ahead and applying to competing colleges with the idea of down the road, you can play them off each other appropriately on appeal. This is just another step in the journey. The colleges are ready for these. They have people that look at the appeals. They have processes that you follow. And this is something that it wouldn't start if you applied early decision and you were appealing that very well, as Murph said, could be like in December. But for other people, it like goes into most families, it's like February, March, and it's like really crunch time if people haven't appealed because it's, middle of April and there really isn't much time for the college to get back. But the key thing to keep in mind, and you might have thought of this because we always get this question when Murph was talking about prior year. So that's 2024 if you have a junior in high school right now. You might be sitting there thinking, I lost my job, or, there's a lot of stuff going on with the current administration, right? Federal workers, things are happening, and you could be out of work. I know that's stressful. I'm not saying don't stress about that, but you're going to definitely be sharing that with the colleges. So don't feel like 2024 is set in stone and there's no way the college is going to look at a higher income, even though you lost your job or you're part-time or you had a health problem, whatever that is. Those are the kind of things you want to share on appeal. And there's a right way to do it. It's not negotiating. You're not, trying to buy a used car or a car. That's not the way to approach the schools. We will go into this in much more depth at that time of year, when it gets to be that time of year, but we just like to plant the seed because I know people hear about prior year, and I get it. You start stressing because your life is different. I have people that, this has been around since President Obama. People that were happily married and now they're separated. Totally different life, right? By this coming fall. And that's something the colleges need to know. And there's ways to submit financial aid forms in certain circumstances. And that's stuff that we can definitely support you on. So I know, I'm going to stop my share here. I
Wait,
know
can
there
I?
were a lot of, yeah, go ahead, Murph.
I just want to add one thing to that. Everyone always asks, what are the reasons to do the FAFSA even if we don't qualify for need-based aid? There's so many families this year that we got extra money on goodwill, or just because we submitted a need-based appeal, even though they didn't qualify for anything, they got an extra $1,000 or $5,000 a year. That's another reason that if you don't file the FAFSA, if you don't file the CSS profile, you can't even go to the financial aid office for a grant or for anything like that. Just another reason to do this, and I just wanted to throw that in there, um, because I think that's a
Yeah,
really
it's a great point. Again, Mike Hinderman at Oklahoma, he said that to us like last year. He's like, if somebody's appealing and saying, "Hey, we're hard up, da da da," and we go and look, and they didn't even file the FAFSA because they only require the FAFSA at that school. They don't look kindly on that. It's like, well, the parents didn't even submit the FAFSA, so really, how hard up can they be? They're never going to say that to the family, right? But it does affect the appeal. So yeah, I think
100%.
that's just one of a bunch of another main reason to
Yeah.
submit the FAFSA is some schools, if you don't submit it for freshman year, you're basically telling that university or college, we never want need-based aid ever. And I used to say it before COVID, that many years ago, like, hey guys, are you going to roll the dice that life? I mean, I always told my kids when I was raising them, change is the only thing you can count on in life. There's just
Yeah.
constant change, and how you respond to it is the name of the game. And then COVID hit, and I was like, oh my God, of course, I didn't anticipate that. But that was a massive change that then people were like, wow, my life is really different. I need to appeal. And they maybe had a steady Eddie kind of life. And all of a sudden it wasn't steady Eddie financially. So that's another reason to get it in. We just don't like people to ever be in a situation where you can't put your best foot forward from an affordability standpoint. So,
Absolutely.
but were you going to say something, Murph?
No,
Oh,
I was
okay.
echoing what you said. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So with that in mind, and I know that Murph had put it in the chat, but it might have just been to a specific person.
Yep.
We would love to offer a 15-minute planning assessment. You'd be meeting with Kevin or another colleague on our
Jason.
expert team, Jason Sloan. Um, and really what the promise of this is to be able to show you exactly how to approach this process. Like I said at the very beginning tonight, it's different with every family, and we can get you on the right track. Is it, I think it's a requirement that they have their free MyCap, right? That's because that's really
Yes.
helpful because you can see it. Yeah, we
Thank
really
you for
want you
pointing
to
that
do
out.
that
Yeah.
because otherwise we're going to spend the whole 15 minutes asking questions and then it's over, right? There's no time to kind of for them for Murph to look at it and say, hey, this is the kind of family you are. This is, you know, probably how your approach is going to be, and da, 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 all that fun stuff. So you really want to have that set up just so they can have a feel for who you are as a family when you're joining. So yeah, and Murph just put the link in the chat. You're gonna get to follow up with the recording, like we said, and that'll also be in there as well.
Yeah.
Anything
Absolutely.
else you want to share there? We got like we're 4 minutes. We're timing this well tonight.
So I will say this: if anyone's on this call and you have a sophomore or a freshman, it is never too early to start this conversation. Every family I've ever met with, it's always the same, which is I wish I started this process sooner. I wish I had more time to plan, was more informed. So even if you have a freshman or a sophomore, especially if you have a junior, take advantage of the college planning assessment. We will absolutely tell you what your next steps are and how you're going to navigate this process. And a big thing too is just knowing your student aid index. But absolutely,
It's
please get
huge.
started. Yeah, you'll be so thankful that you did. Um, Zero regrets, I promise that.
Yep. Murph's like one of the nicest people in the world. Much nicer than I am. Much nicer. And he lives in Jersey, and Jersey gets a bad rap. I actually am from
Get really
Jersey.
better at.
So I love Jersey. I love Jersey. So all
I
right,
think we get a
everybody.
really bad
Well,
rap.
have a good rest of the evening. And
Yep.
have, yeah, we usually don't do webinars on Monday. So I can say have a great week, everybody, because we're just right at the beginning of the week.
This was a first. But yeah,
Yeah.
everyone, thank you so much. Hope as everyone has a good week, like Pet said.
Yeah, yeah. And thanks for joining, Murph. It was fun.
It was fun. All right, guys.
All right, guys. Take care,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.